Sam Bradshaw on the in the premium section. You'll see him. He just like, here's a story, and it's always about either what just happened and or what is about to happen with Baylor and Iowa State. Such an intriguing game, it appears, tomorrow at 2:30. Also this, Brazos Parking, where Sikkim 365 has a tailgate location along with hundreds of others. It is Customer Appreciation Day. Enjoy a free item on them. Ice cream, cold Coors Light, Balcones Oktoberfest beer, whiskey sour cocktail. Paul, you're not allowed. Brazos Parking would like to thank Centex Satellite Heritage Creamery One Day Bar, and that's tomorrow on the MLK location just across from McLean Stadium in Waco. We're now joined by S11 Sam Bradshaw. Are you dilated yet?
Of all the questions I thought you'd ask, that would not be one among them.
No, I was just making sure. Sam, of course, is on baby watch. We're excited about that for you and excited we get another week in. All right, Sam, this game is getting a lot of play. And one is that we cover Baylor, but also these two teams have put on some pretty interesting games of late. But Iowa State seems to still be a couple of years ahead because of the transition in the coaching staff. What are your thoughts about Baylor and Iowa State just overall at the start?
Well, Iowa State's come out not exactly sprinting like their preseason number 7 ranking would imply. They really kind of sputtered on offense. Their defense has been outstanding, but their offense really hadn't gotten in gear, whereas Baylor has looked mostly really good outside of a couple turnovers and drive-extending penalties. But at the end of the day, you're talking about a Texas State team that lost to Incarnate Word. You're talking about Kansas. And you're talking about Texas Southern, which might be the worst team they've played in 2 decades. So good on them for handling their business, but we really don't have a good barometer for this Baylor team. We're going to get it over the next 3-4 weeks between Iowa State, Oak State, West Virginia, and BYU. We're going to have a real good idea about who this team is. But, it's an interesting matchup because both teams over the last couple of years have made it to the Big 12 title game, but done so being consistently able to win close games in conference play. Going into those title games, both teams had been 4-1 in single-score games during conference play. So while Iowa State certainly got a lot of accolades off of making the title game last year, it's not that they were overwhelming. I mean, even Baylor's very struggling and COVID-impacted unit last year was a goal line series away from sending that game to overtime in Ames.
Sam, you mentioned that they've beaten all the people they're supposed to beat. Is there, when you watch the film, how much better is their technique, especially along the fronts? That way, granted, they can have the best technique in the world. If the other guy's better than you, he's better than you and beat you. But is their technique so much better that last year that you can see that they can be competitive and maybe even win this game against Iowa State?
Oh, without question, their technique is miles better. A lot of it is the simplification of the scheme. You're doing fewer things and you're doing them very well. But another thing is there were just times last fall. I mean, I keep pointing back to it because it's such a textbook example, but the West Virginia game, you had pass protections where nobody blocked the nose guard. You had, they run power and 2 guys on the front side are unblocked. You just can't have that. And this year they've done a good job of knowing their responsibilities, going out and executing. Now, how well their efficiency remains when they start facing some really strong defensive lines, we'll see how that goes. But as far as handling their own business and making the opponent actually beat them, they're miles away from where they were last year. And I absolutely think they have a chance to hang in there with this Iowa State team and potentially beat them. Iowa State really struggled against Northern Iowa and Iowa, at least offensively. And offensively, I really think that Iowa State's run game, their offensive line is pretty good, but I don't think they've got a bunch of NFL guys up there. I think you can limit them. And I really think in the run game, Iowa exposed this, but they really, really missed the 6'7", 270-pound tight end nobody could remember the name of, Dylan Sainer, the third guy in their trio. He's gone. He was the guy that did all the dirty work. And multiple times in that Iowa game, Iowa's linebackers or defensive line took one of their star tight ends and pushed him back including on the play where they got the fumble return for the touchdown. The guy who punched the ball loose punched that tight end in the backfield first. Their line's solid, but I really think they're not blocking on the edge nearly as well. So Iowa and Northern Iowa sat with four-man rush, variations on conservative zone looks, handled them on first down, handled them on second down, and then they either went to cover one or cover two man on third down, and ISU couldn't break out of it. Their third down conversion rate was not good. They were punting far more than they wanted, and Iowa especially turned them over. And, if Baylor can hold up against the run like that without giving up the ghost in the air, they absolutely have a chance to win this, because I was not impressed by what I saw against Northern Iowa and Iowa. And granted, those are two good defensive teams. But for ISU to reach their preseason expectations, they've got to pick it up.
Sam, when it comes to Gary Bohannon, this is clearly his biggest start to date. And he has looked good over these first few games, but again, the lack of competition. So, what do you view as the most important keys to Gary Bohannon translating what he's done so far to also doing it against stiffer competition? What do you think Iowa State's looking to do to try and prevent that from happening?
Well, with Iowa State, their defense, and this is where they're pretty innovative. Athletically, their safeties, their linebackers, their corners, and even their D-line isn't necessarily any quicker than what you see. But because they run that 3-3-5, they can do an awful lot of disguise, and they are very physical. But they'll sit with three deep safeties. They could be in cover one. They could be in 4 or 5 different variations on cover three. They could be bringing a blitz. They could be dropping 8. They do everything out of a very similar pre-snap look. So it's going to be incumbent on Gary to just protect the ball. Use your legs to extend drives, similar to how Brewer's been able to do it against these guys the last couple of years. But really just protect the ball, take what they give you, do your best to get clues on what they're doing pre-snap, using motion, using formation. I have a feeling that'll be a big part of the game plan, to use formations and motion to really try and get these guys into some predictable looks. Because if you let them disguise and then surprise him at the snap all night, it's going to be really difficult on the kid. You've got to do everything you can to get them into some predictable looks. And if you can do that, you can scheme up some one-on-ones against that secondary. And I think Baylor's got the speed to run by these guys. Tyquan Thornton had a couple big plays against them in 2019, and a lot of those kids on the other side are still there.
Sam, who ends up with more yards rushing, Breece Hall or the combination of Abram Smith and Treston Ebner?
That's tough to tell.
Well, to Breece Hall's credit, you just named him, and it's 2 other guys he's going against. Yeah, but I know what you're saying.
But he's the lion's share of their carries. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a similar amount of carries, in my opinion. But I'd probably go with the 2 Baylor guys, simply because I don't think Iowa State's going to be as keyed in on them. But, I just haven't been impressed with Iowa State's run game against the 2 deep teams they played to play defense. And then, Baylor's so unproven. That's a tough one.
The thing about Purdy, and he can be erratic, but he had the really bad start against Baylor last year, and then he just seemed like if he can make a throw, and I guess it's like a pitcher who can't throw a strike, and then all of a sudden he gets somebody to swing at a bad pitch or whatever, but he's streaky. Is that who he just is? And does Baylor have enough pressure on him tomorrow? Can they get enough pressure on him tomorrow? We've talked about with you before. Do you think they can do that? Because that's what they need to do, but he also can extend plays with his legs as well.
Yeah, they've got to do their best. When they get to him, they've got to get him down. The way they let Brady McBride extend plays for Texas State, they can't let that happen here. Purdy's too good at extending drives and extending plays. But I think they can get to him. I think some of the stuff that Iowa and Northern Iowa did to get to him, I think Baylor can replicate some of that. And I also think that Aranda and Roberts have been extremely vanilla defensively because they really haven't had to be anything else. So why would you give people film on some of your preferred pressure packages and things like that? So I think they'll be able to get some pressure on him, because Iowa State's passing game, they've had a lot of drops. They've had a lot of misfires. I really think that passing game has kind of slipped over the last couple of years because while Xavier Hutchinson is a very good receiver for them, I don't feel like they've had that one can't miss matchup the way they had with Hakeem Butler, where you just had like a 6'6" guy with a 7-foot wingspan that could outrun everybody. And that made it so much easier for those tight ends. That made it so much easier for Purdy. I just don't think they've had that much of a lead guy. And while Hutchinson is still one of the best ones in the Big 12, I don't think he's quite at that level. And that's, at least in terms of forcing a defense to scheme certain matchups for him. I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just think with Purdy, he's going to be a gamer. I also kind of feel like he's trying to do too much at times and then going too far in the other direction. He'll press and then he'll be like, okay, I turned the ball over too much. Now I need to play within myself. And then he goes too far in the other direction. And I feel like he's in his own head a little bit.
Thank you, man. Sam, we appreciate it. It ought to be fun. We get some evidence tomorrow. Paul,
Sam,
Greg?
Sam, how much did you enjoy watching a fullback score a touchdown last week with a tight end touchdown also mixed in on their first couple scores?
I feel like it's 1990 all over again.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the days.
Yeah, fullbacks and
God,
tight
back
ends
when
scoring
football
touchdowns.
was fun to watch. I'm not saying it's not now, but
Yeah, it was
just a
what?
simple game, huh? Back before there was the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, back when BYU putting a tailback, fullback, and tight end on the field was considered wide open.
That's right. It was. All right, man. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. S11, Sam Bradshaw with us Fridays at 5:30 for as long as possible. Breaking down Baylor, their opponent, looking back at it as well. After the game's over, Craig does an audio podcast. Paul and JD do an immediate post-game show as well.
I think it might be me and Colt this week. I'm hoping
really?
for Colt, yes.
What?
We got to move cars, so we need to go to commercial break.
All right. Okay. All right. And also on top of that, of course, there's a lot of articles. Brian has his, Colt has his, Grayson has his. We all do. This is Sikkim.